May 3rd, 2010. A quiet Monday evening in Johannesburg was about to explode into chaos. Lolly Jackson, the man known as the King of Teaze, was living life as he always did, fast, loud, and unapologetically larger than life. At the heart of South Africa's adult entertainment scene, he was a strip club mogul who seemed untouchable. But as the sun dipped below the skyline that evening, everything changed. Inside a modest house in Kempton Park, something unthinkable happened. The king was silenced. This is the story of how South Africa's strip club kingpin met his end, and why the truth behind his still feels like a puzzle with too many missing pieces. The man the world came to know as Lolly Jackson, the loud and flamboyant King of Teaze, wasn't born with that name. He entered the world as Emmanuel dos Santos in the sprawling, unpredictable heart of the Congo. His life didn't begin in comfort or luxury. It was shaped by struggle, by movement, and by a deep need to chase something better than what life had handed him. His family, of Portuguese descent, joined the wave of migrants looking for opportunity far from home. In the mid-1960s, with the Congo struggling in the uncertainty of its post-colonial future, the Dos Santos family made the decision to leave. They packed up and headed south, settling in South Africa. They found a new home in southern Johannesburg. It was a world completely different from the lush tropics of the Congo. There, young Emmanuel was placed in school, but he quickly showed that the classroom wasn't where he belonged. He was restless, often clashing with teachers, and seemed uninterested in the usual path laid out for him. While other kids followed the rules, he was already thinking bigger. His focus wasn't on schoolwork. It was in the outside world, where real things happened, where money changed hands and risks were rewarded. During those early school years, he picked up the nickname Lolly. The name came from his habit of selling lollipops to other kids during breaks. While it might have seemed like harmless fun, this was actually his first business. He saw a need, filled it, and made a little profit. That candy hustle showed a glimpse of the sharp mind behind the mischief. The name Lolly stuck, and over time, it became more than just a nickname. It became his identity. School couldn't contain him for long. By the time he reached grade 8, he decided he'd had enough. He walked away, not because he couldn't keep up, but because he believed he didn't need it. He wanted to get out there, make money, and build something real. That decision changed everything. It put him on a path where everything he earned or lost would come from his own choices. Once he was out of school, Lolly Jackson wasted no time stepping into the real world. He jumped straight into work, ready to earn and eager to prove himself. His first steps as a businessman didn't involve suits or offices. He started out on construction sites, taking on tough physical work through a paving company he helped build. It was hard labor, but it was his. This was where he learned the basics of running a business, how to manage people, win contracts, and close a deal. More than anything, he learned how to sell. He had a natural way with people and knew how to pitch his service with charm and confidence. But Lolly wasn't the type to stick to one thing for long. His mind never stopped working. He was always chasing the next opportunity, always looking for a smarter way to make money. He opened a garage, buying and flipping used cars. That business suited him perfectly because he loved cars. As his business dealings expanded, the lines between right and wrong began to blur. The world he moved in was gritty and competitive. To get ahead, you had to push boundaries, and Lolly was willing to do that. He started building a reputation for cutting corners and playing fast and loose with the rules. At first, these were small things, nothing major, but they laid the foundation for something darker. The further he went, the more that line between legitimate business and the criminal world began to fade. While he was hustling through construction sites and car garages, chasing money and reputation, Lolly was also searching for something softer, something real. He found it in a woman named Sharon, who became his first wife. Their relationship moved quickly, much like the rest of his life. For a while, it seemed she gave him the balance he needed, a sense of normalcy in a world driven by ambition and chaos. When they had their first child, it was a moment of pure joy for Lolly. For the first time, his relentless work and risk-taking had a deeper purpose. It wasn't just about chasing success anymore. It was about creating a future for someone who carried his name and his blood. But that joy didn't last. In a tragic turn that would haunt him forever, their baby passed away. The details of the loss stayed private, but its impact on Lolly was written all over him. The man known for his confidence and toughness was shattered. That kind of pain changes a person. It didn't soften him. It made him harder. It deepened his distrust in life, made him believe that happiness was always temporary, always one step from being taken away. And from then on, it seemed like he was trying to outrun that pain by living louder, taking bigger risks, and surrounding himself with all the noise and excess he could find. His marriage to Sharon eventually collapsed under the weight of their grief and the growing pressure of his business life. But Lolly wasn't someone who stayed down for long. Whether in business or in love, he always came back swinging. His passion made sure of that. He would marry again, this time to a woman named Demi. Later, he shocked many when he married for a third time. This time, it was to a much younger woman who happened to be his first wife's niece, also named Sharon. The relationship raised eyebrows, but Lolly didn't care. If anything, it fit perfectly with the public image he was building. Bold, unpredictable, and completely unfazed by what others thought. Even with his unpredictable love life, Lolly Jackson never lost sight of his mission to build an empire. And when the opportunity came, he seized it with both hands. When South Africa stepped into its new democratic era in the 1990s, it wasn't just politics that changed. The entire cultural landscape shifted. Years of censorship and conservative values gave way to a society ready to explore, express, and push boundaries. It was a time of freedom and possibility. And right in the middle of this new chapter stood Lolly Jackson. Where others were unsure of how to navigate the new rules, Lolly was already thinking of how to break them, or better yet, how to turn them into profit. That's when the idea hit him. South Africa was ready for something bold, something different. Not just another grimy strip joint hidden in the shadows, but a high-end gentleman's club. It would have the glamour of Las Vegas, the polish of a luxury venue, and just enough edge to stir up controversy. He called it Teazers. From the moment the first Teazers opened its doors in Rivonia, Johannesburg, it made noise. Lolly didn't cut corners. The place was drenched in luxury. Plush red interiors, polished brass finishes, high-end lighting, and sound systems that made the whole club pulse with energy. He wanted wealthy professionals to feel at home there, to see the club not as something dirty or lowbrow, but as an elite entertainment destination. This wasn't just a side hustle, it was Lolly's vision brought to life. But what really set Teazers apart wasn't just the ambiance, it was Lolly's unmatched ability to market it. He turned heads with giant billboards plastered across the city, featuring glamorous, half-dressed women paired with clever, often cheeky slogans. He cleverly branded Teazers as an adult entertainment venue, distancing it from the traditional, seedier image of strip clubs. He brought in dancers from around the world and emphasized their skill, treating them like performers, not just eye candy. It was all part of a larger strategy. He wanted Teazers to feel like part of South Africa's new, open identity. By the time critics began to understand what he was doing, it was too late. Teazers had become more than a club. It was a phenomenon. Lolly Jackson had not just built a business, he had built a brand. One that made him infamous, powerful, and untouchable, at least for a while. The success of Teazers turned Lolly Jackson into a household name. But he didn't just get rich. He made sure everyone knew it. His life became as flamboyant and theatrical as the business he ran. He wasn't content to be just the man behind the scenes. He was the show. He didn't hide his extravagant lifestyle. The women, the wealth, the power, it was all out in the open. To some, he was a sleazy playboy. To others, he was a self-made legend. Either way, people couldn't look away. But behind the flash and fame, there was danger brewing. His success had started attracting more than just fans. Rivals, enemies, and figures from the criminal world began circling. The bigger his empire grew, the more complicated and risky his world became. His bold personality started to invite problems he could no longer laugh off or spin into publicity. One of his biggest headaches came from the tax authorities. The South African Revenue Service had been eyeing Lolly's empire with increasing suspicion. With so much cash moving through his clubs and his lavish lifestyle on full display, officials began to question just how much of it was actually being declared. Investigations led to raids on his clubs and even his home, with assets seized and files taken. Lolly didn't just fight these battles in courtrooms. He took the fight public, giving interviews and making bold claims that he was being unfairly targeted. In his view, it was personal. In the eyes of the law, It was simply a matter of unpaid taxes. Whatever the truth, the pressure from these investigations began to take its toll, draining his finances and pushing him further into defensive mode. Inside his clubs, the problems didn't stop. While he liked to present himself as a kind of father figure to the dancers and staff, many of them saw things differently. Behind the velvet curtains, resentment was building. Dancers complained about fines being deducted from their pay, sometimes for being late, other times for not selling enough drinks. The working conditions sparked frequent complaints and even legal challenges. Some claimed Lolly treated them more like possessions than employees, and over time, these stories started to surface in the media, cracking the polished image he had so carefully built. Then there was the violence. Lolly had never been one to shy away from a fight, and his temper was no secret. Over the years, several people accused him of physical assault. In one case, a former employee claimed Lolly beat him after an argument over money. In another, he reportedly attacked one of his own bouncers during a late-night dispute. These weren't just rumors whispered among staff. They became public scandals that added to the storm already brewing around him. His confrontational style didn't stop with his employees or the government. In the competitive world of adult entertainment, Lolly had declared war on his rivals. He was fiercely territorial and didn't hesitate to use aggressive tactics to keep his spot at the top. He saw competitors as enemies, and he went after them with a ruthless energy that only made his list of enemies grow longer. For every club that closed, there was someone behind it who had a personal score to settle with him. As time went on, it became harder to separate the man from the chaos around him. However, his empire kept growing, and as Lolly Jackson's empire continued to grow, so did the risks that came with it. Teazers was bringing in mountains of cash, but with his ongoing war against the tax authorities, Lolly needed a way to hide it. He was looking for someone who could help him move money quietly, far from the reach of the law. That search led him into the heart of Johannesburg's criminal underworld, and straight to the doorstep of one of the most dangerous men in the country, Radovan Krejcir. Krejcir wasn't just some neighborhood gangster. He was a fugitive billionaire from the Czech Republic, wanted for serious crimes including fraud and attempted. After escaping custody and slipping into South Africa with a fake passport, he quickly built himself a new empire right in the suburb of Bedfordview, the same place where Lolly lived and ran his businesses. With his money, power, and willingness to use violence, Krejcir made himself untouchable. He had influence in high places, from the police to politicians, and he didn't hesitate to use it. Their paths crossed because they needed each other. Lolly allegedly had millions in cash he wanted to move offshore, far away from the South African Revenue Service. Krejcir, on the other hand, needed a steady supply of local money to support his lavish lifestyle and illegal operations. The solution was simple but dangerous. Lolly would hand over large sums of money in South Africa, and in return, Krejcir would make sure the same amount showed up in Lolly's offshore accounts, mostly in Cyprus. For a while, it worked. Lolly got his money out, and Krejcir strengthened his grip on the criminal world. But this wasn't a business relationship built on trust. It was a fragile alliance between two men who were used to being in control, and both had tempers that could ignite in an instant. It didn't take long for cracks to show. Fights erupted, and what started as a partnership soon turned into a power struggle. Lolly might have built his empire with street smarts and charm, but he was now swimming with sharks in waters he didn't fully understand. He wasn't just facing off against the government anymore. He was tied to a man who would get what he wanted and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. The deeper Lolly got into this arrangement, the more he realized that there was no easy way out. He had made a deal with someone who didn't play by any rules, and the cost of that decision would soon become clear. By the end of 2009, the partnership between Lolly and Krejcir had started to fall apart. Whatever trust existed between them was gone. Lolly believed Krejcir was ripping him off. He claimed that after handing over huge amounts of cash, the promised deposits into his Cypriot accounts were missing, delayed, or incomplete. For someone like Lolly, who had always relied on control, this was more than a business problem. It was a betrayal, and he couldn't afford it. Between the drawn-out legal battles, the cost of keeping teasers running, and his own expensive lifestyle, Lolly was under pressure like never before. He became more frantic, making phone calls, demanding answers, and asking for help to recover what he believed was stolen from him. He confided in people that he feared he'd made a huge mistake by trusting Krejcir. The powerful image he'd spent years crafting was starting to crack. At the center of the chaos stood George Luca, also known as George Smith. He was the man who connected Lolly and Kredshear, someone who knew how to move money, fix problems, and make things disappear. For years, Luca had helped to keep the machine running smoothly, but now he was stuck in the middle of a bitter and dangerous fallout. Both sides were angry, and both were capable of extreme reactions. The fight eventually centered around one particular sum, 740,000 rands, which was approximately 100,000 US dollars. Lolly wanted it back. He was done being patient. He started calling out Kredshear directly, ignoring the chain of communication and demanding answers from the man himself. That was a bold move. To most, confronting Kredshear like that would be unthinkable. This was a man known for settling disputes with violence. On May 3, 2010, Lolly Jackson started his day as he usually did, juggling business and dealing with growing tension behind the scenes. But beneath the surface, he was more desperate than ever. He was fixated on one thing: getting back the money he believed Radovan Kredshear had stolen from him. That evening, he told his wife Demi that he was going to meet George Luca to collect what he was owed. He seemed restless, almost like a man heading into a storm he couldn't avoid. He climbed into his powerful Jeep Grand Cherokee and drove off into the chilly Johannesburg night. His destination was a quiet home on a tree-lined street in Kempton Park near OR Tambo International Airport. The house belonged to George Luca, and although it looked ordinary on the outside, it would become the scene of something far from normal. Inside that home, everything was about to come crashing down. Exactly what happened inside remains unknown, but the most detailed version comes from Luca himself, the only person who publicly admitted to being there. He claimed he was just a pawn, used to lure Lolly into a deadly setup orchestrated by Kredshear. According to Luca, not long after Lolly arrived, Kredshear entered the house. The atmosphere instantly turned tense. What followed was a fiery argument, with Lolly demanding the money he was owed. Kredshear, cold and dismissive, showed no intention of settling the matter peacefully. Luca said the shouting escalated until Lolly, in a moment of fury, slapped a phone out of Kredshear's hand. That single act of defiance changed everything. Luca claimed that Kredshear calmly gave an order to one of his men. Then came the sound of Lolly Jackson was hit multiple times. He collapsed to the floor, his life slipping away in a house that felt far removed from the wild nightlife empire he had built. Luca later insisted he didn't pull the trigger. He said Kredshear forced him to hold the to the fact, making him part of the crime and leaving him alone with the body. Whether that's true or not remains part of the mystery. But that night, Lolly Jackson's life ended not with justice or closure, but with bullets and betrayal. As the hours passed and Lolly's phone went silent, his wife Demi became increasingly anxious. Her calls kept going to voicemail. Knowing the dangerous world her husband had become tangled in, she feared the worst. Instead of calling the police right away, she reached out to a private investigator. Her next call was to a senior police intelligence officer, General Joey Mabasa. Strangely, Lolly had told her in the past to contact him if something ever went wrong. Later that night, Mabasa received a call that changed everything. It was George Luca, panicked and stammering. He told the general that he had gotten into a fight with Lolly and him. This confession was wildly different from the story Luca would later tell, where Kredshear was the real. Luca gave the address of the house in Kempton Park, then hung up and turned off his phone. From that moment on, he vanished. Police were dispatched to the address. The house looked quiet, with lights still on and the front door unlocked. Inside, there were subtle signs of a struggle. But the real discovery came in the garage. Lying on the concrete floor was Lolly Jackson, his body riddled with bullet wounds. The strip club kingpin was News of the spread like wildfire. It dominated headlines across South Africa. Love him or hate him, Lolly had always drawn attention, and his violent end was like something ripped from a gangster film. All signs pointed to Luca, the man who had confessed as the main suspect. A manhunt began, reaching beyond the country's borders. But among those familiar with Johannesburg's criminal circles, few believed Luca had acted alone. He wasn't powerful enough to pull off something this bold on his own. The real power behind the scenes, they believed, was Kredshear. The motive seemed obvious. A massive financial deal had gone wrong. The police had a body and a man on the run, but the true mastermind was still free. What started with a body in a garage turned into a long, tangled fight for justice. And the biggest question remained unanswered. Who had really ordered the hit on Lolly Jackson? In the hours after Lolly Jackson was down, George Luca disappeared without a trace. While police were still trying to make sense of the crime scene in Kempton Park, Luca was already gone. He slipped across the border into Mozambique, then made his way back to his native Cyprus. That single phone call he had made to General Mabasa, admitting to the had turned him into South Africa's most wanted man. The authorities wasted no time. Interpol issued a red notice, and a manhunt spread across borders. For almost 2 years, Luca was a ghost, his name now inseparable from the brutal of the King of Teaze. But in 2012, his run came to an end. Cypriot police, acting on a tip-off, tracked him down and placed him under arrest. Bringing him back to South Africa was a different challenge altogether. Luca launched an aggressive legal battle to fight extradition, digging in his heels while locked away in a Cypriot prison. And as he sat behind bars, the story he had told the night of began to shift. The confession vanished. In its place emerged a new version of events, one that was far more complicated and explosive. Luca now claimed he didn't pull the trigger at all. He said he had only witnessed the killing and that the real murderer was Radovan Kredshir. The twist stunned everyone. Luca offered to enter witness protection in exchange for testifying against Kredshir, not just for Lali's but for other crimes as well. South African prosecutors, desperate for a breakthrough in their long-standing pursuit of Kredshir, saw a rare opportunity. If Luca's story held up, it could finally bring down one of the country's most dangerous figures. After years of legal tug-of-war, Luca was eventually extradited. In early 2014, he landed back in South Africa and was swiftly charged with Lolly Jackson's. What followed in court was less a trial and more a tragic spectacle. However, George Luca died of lung cancer in 2015 before the truth could fully emerge. With his the case collapsed. Though officially closed, the public is left with more questions than answers, and a mystery that may never be solved.